Understanding connectors for electric 2 and 3 wheel. We're going to talk about first the introduction of the connectors. We're going to discuss about the basic understanding. What are the connectors inside an electric scooter? The common requirements for electric scooters or bikes. We're going to talk about some test plans that needs to be in place, do's and don'ts of how to handle or use a connector. We're going to see and discuss about choosing the right connectors. And then later on, we'll talk about more about application, some connectivity solutions, and how to identify or find what connector is suitable for your requirements. Then a little bit of discussion regarding high performance contacts. Okay, so what are connectors? Here is just an example, okay? What are the connectors used in an electric vehicle or 2 or 3 wheeler? For example, a scooter like this one here is just a simple idea of how a battery is connected into a motor. This is called a discharge because the motor is going to deplete the battery. And then once the battery is depleted, there's another connector that goes into a connected into a charging port, which is then you can bring the vehicle to your home, charge it on your wall charger. Okay, what are connectors? And a connector is an electromechanical device used to join electrical conductors and create an electrical circuit. Most connectors have a gender, like this one right here. We have a male component and a female component. Male component sometimes called they are pins, having the pins, and female having the sockets. Connectors are in our everyday lives. You will see them everywhere. This is just an example. Here on the left side is a computer tower for a desktop computer. It features a lot of those connectors behind. Like as you can see here, there's a power supply connector. And then the other peripheral connections like USB ports, HDMIs, Ethernet ports, and some of those audio jacks that goes to the speaker system. So um, an example of this, of course, is this is something different. It is used inside or indoors application. What we are going to more tackle will be connectors used outdoors. And then this one, special one, because it's going to be used in a scooter. So you see here that the connector consists of conductors. They are metal parts. Of course, this metal parts needs to be insulated so that no one can touch them. The insulation is then uh, created around these pins or conductors. As you can see here, we have an example of a hybrid waterproof connector. Those pins are here shown. It is a hybrid because it has a power and signal together in one connector. So the insulator that holds these pins will be this one right here. It's a made of plastic, and it's our commonly used as insulator housing for a connector, holding two types of contacts. And then this is a waterproof connector because this features an O-ring. Okay, this O-ring is going to create a seal once you put or plug this connector with its mating pair. Like for example, here, a mating pair, which is a panel connector. Once you insert these connectors together and fully engaged, they should be sealed and water is not going to enter the pins. So another sealing feature should be uh, put into the receptacle or the mating pair. This receptacle connector, you will be able to see either on a battery or sometimes outside the vehicle that features an onboard charge where you can bring your uh, scooter at home and charge it with your wall socket. So it has this gasket so that water is not going to enter the battery on the battery box. So this is just a basic understanding of connector. Of course, from that perspective, there will be more to consider once we're talking about designing a connector. So connector design, it goes deeper. It also depends on the requirement of the system. Maybe some of you are asking, okay, how about the voltage, for example, or the current rating? Can we use any different, any connector to use for any voltage? So for example, a voltage, it will have an effect on the size of the connector, voltage and current. So an example for voltage, how is going to affect the connector design is that the voltage needs to have a good isolation of two opposite pins. So if you can see here, these have two power contacts. If we are talking about a 30 volts connector and a 300 volts connector, a 30 volts connector may have these contacts much nearer to each other. And at 300 volts or 100 volts, these two pins needs to be farther from each other. So this is called this is what we call a creepage distance. A creepage distance is considered um, once a voltage has um, a required voltage, and then there will be a standard creepage distance to follow. About the current rating, the difference of a design for example, a 5 ampere current rated connector against a 60 ampere, for example, will be the OD of the contacts. Something similar to a water pipe. A smaller water pipe can pass through a bit of water. Then if you increase the diameter of the water pipe, it will increase the flow or the volume of water to flow. It's the same thing as with the current. So these needs to be considered once you are designing a connector or choosing a connector. Later on, we will be talking about more how you can choose a connector. Okay, so that it doesn't stop there. Another thing that we need to consider is that the insulator, the plastic being used to hold on these conductors need to be well thought of. There are plastic uh, that needs to be flammable resistance. Okay, so that if there is a case of a short circuit, for example, this is not going to catch fire. It's going to extinguish itself. Or there are some instances that the connector will be used in higher temperatures. So there are different plastic materials that we can choose from. Okay, so that is basic connector, also a little bit of design ideas for you guys. So let's move to the next pages. These are the common requirements for connector in an electric bike. Similar to what we are talking about earlier, need to have a high current rating at least, or at least the current rating needs to meet the requirements. So there are requirements like discharging, ampere and watt hour, and the peak current, for example. The connector needs to be able to withstand the current carrying capacity and needs to be defined. There's a waterproof rating requirement, like what we are talking about earlier. Needs to be that the water should not enter the metal parts to avoid corrosion over time. These connector needs to be reliable in vibrating environment. So vibration can have an impact on those contacts that we are talking about earlier. Vibration tends to create what we call fretting. So those micro vibrations that happens when you're using the motorcycle, it can lead to those a scratching of surface of the pin and the socket. Once that outer surface has been removed because of the fretting, then contact resistance can become higher. Okay, so user experience is important for to consider on a connector because we have a wide range of people using these connectors, especially if um, you want to take uh, the vehicle out and then go home, charge it, and you're doing this every day. You need to be able to use it properly. Accessibility and consumer experience of handling a connector easily, it needs to be considered as well. Temperature rise performance is important because the connector needs to be able to withstand ambient temperatures and also electrical temperatures or temperatures that has been caused by electrical transfers. So this is important and needs to be tested once a connector has been designed. It needs to be high mating cycles. The mating cycle means that plugging in and plugging out, that is considered one mating cycle. So an example is like here, it is a battery. The connector mating cycle need to outlast the battery lifespan. So for example, battery lifespan can go like 3 years. The connector needs to charge every day, plugging and unplugging needs to withstand that 3 years of usage. Okay. So how are we able to make sure even we're not be using the connectors yet? So a good test plan must be in place. This is an example of a test matrix. This is SAE US car 37, which is commonly used also for automotive testing with the IATF 16949. Okay, one example here, like for example, a vibration test. We need to test like 10 samples. And this test consists of 6 stages of sequence. The first one is doing visual inspection. The second stage will be the connector mating cycle test. The third, we're going to test the circuit continuity monitoring. And while we're doing the monitoring of the continuity, we're going to do simultaneously testing the vibration, making sure that while this is undergoing vibration test, there's no cut in electric supply. And then after the vibration, we test the voltage drop and contact resistance. And then number 5, the insulation resistance, and going back to 6, visual inspection. So that is just one. We have a lot of test sequence involved once a connector is being or designed. Okay. Okay, just some do's and don'ts with the connector. First is that, okay, you do not have to exert any external force or weight on the cable, or once you're trying to remove the connection, do not pull the cable by itself. Hot plugging as much as possible. we do not recommend this with a connector. Um, Hot plugging is when uh, a connector is energized before you even plug them together, because this is going to create sparks. Spark is going to create problems with the contacts. So hot plugging as much as possible, try to avoid this one. Ensure that the connector is free of dust, mud, and debris that could potentially cause poor contact or short circuit. Sometimes the dust that comes or goes inside the connector, and some dust are conductive and may create a bridge in between two of the pins, and then it can create short circuit. Please make sure that the plug is fully inserted into the panel connector while mating. That is why some of the connectors, they have this nut feature that once you put them together, mate them together, there will be this audible click, which is a confirmation that these two have been mated, engaged properly. Okay, the number 5 is do not use third-party connectors that mate with original Chogori ones. So a third-party connector is basically like a copying of a connector that is already existing. They want to make a copy. But the problem with this is that it did not follow the certain standard that went through in creating that connector, original connector. There will be design points like, is it following the proper tolerances, for example? Is it following the corresponding plastic material that has been intended for the application? And then has the pins similar treatment as the original ones? These small things, they only know this in the design stages. If someone is going to design a new connector that is just a mating compatible but did not consider a lot, then there will be risk. Okay. Next one, talking about risk, is that, okay, we see these are common connector issues and problems. You see that connectors here are burning up, they are melting, cables are breaking apart. Some connectors are non-waterproof, or some connectors gets corroded like this one. And then sometimes with very high mating numbers, the pins gets broken, or the insulator of the connector breaks up because it's not properly aligned with each other once they're putting them together. These are just some examples of issues. Okay, so we need to choose the right connectors. This is a little bit of comparison showing you with what Chogorian traditional connectors have. A traditional connector similar to what you see right here, commonly seen on TVs and those computers. Uh, but as you know, or unfortunately, a lot of bike manufacturers still use this one. So comparison is that Chogori connectors, they have different current rating based on, you can choose based on whatever electrical requirement, application, and current rating you need. It has good environmental protection, mechanical life. It can go up to 3,000 or more based on what pin treatment you want to do. Vibration resistance, yes. A pull-out resistance. This has been tested so that uh, there is a proper pull-out standard that needs to be considered for a regular person handling this connector. The size is small because we can make the connector like maximize the space to include power and signal together. And yes, signal transmission needs to be there. So this is an example of what a good uh, connection system for an e-scooter is. So there are waterproof splitters inside. There are waterproof connector for the lights, for the horn, brake lights, display, charger, the battery, and the motor connector. So this is the most ideal form of a waterproof connection system. Okay, this just shows you what connectors are used currently in a lot of battery systems. If you see here, the battery consists of two connectors. One connector, similar to what I was showing you earlier, is being used for battery discharging. Commonly, it is connected to the motor, right? And another connector here is used for battery charging. So discharging has more power requirement and more pin requirement because the battery now has the BMS system. They are basically smart batteries that transmit um, communication signals. Battery charging, on the other hand, is that they don't need those communications. They use lower power and lower count of pins. So this one goes to the battery. Sometimes the other connectors used outside the vehicle in under the seat so that you can bring the vehicle to your house and charge it from the wall socket. There are different battery options also where it only features connector, one connector for charging and discharging at the same time. This is one example of that is uh, a connector can be a discharge, or you can remove this, bring it to your home and charge it separately. Or you just keep it on and then charge it using the charging port outside the vehicle. Um, this is an example of a swappable battery charging station. It's another form of charging way now is becoming more and more popular, where a user just brings the battery to a station, a rack, something like this, puts in, charge its depleted battery and get a freshly charged one. It only happens in a few minutes. Okay, there are many of these in the market already, a lot of different designs of cabinet. Yeah, you get the point here. Other examples is a manual charging mode using cable, something like this. Okay, or another example, such as this one. Same concept, getting a drain battery, putting it inside, getting a freshly charged one. Same one here. Okay, and we're back. So these are the features of that swapping scenario. Okay, they should be having multiple insertions. It should be easy to lock and unlock, convenient for quick battery replacements. Consumer habits cannot be fixed. There may be inappropriate usage scenarios. It means that the connectors need to be strong enough to handle different usage scenarios. So these are two scenarios, one for a cable charging or a bottom battery scenario, as you can see right here. So the bottom battery scenario is using this floating type connector, what we call it, where it moves um, to properly align itself. So every time you put in the battery, it always aligns the pin perfectly. Okay. Other swapping scenarios, example applications here. This one is a removable battery and onboard charge. Another onboard charging, or a removable battery, taking the battery to your wall socket right there. This battery, it has this special design, like a suitcase style, where they are able to deliver the mail by using this pedelec design bike. Some of the bikes are very interesting in making these battery packs where it has different shapes so that it can fit properly and save space on the trunk, for example. So if you can see right here, the connector design is in a way that the nut designed to be handled by one finger only. So user experience is important because in this scenario is that we don't have much finger access. So having to design a nut such as this one, the user will be able to remove easily. Okay, so others like the connectors being used for four-wheel cargo bikes like this one. Let's continue showing some of the applications. And yeah, these are the features for an onboard charging, what we are showing earlier. An onboard charge needs to have a degree of protection against solid foreign objects, or what we call a ingress protection, IP protection for water as well. It needs to have a good audible click to see, making it feel that it's properly engaged. And then it needs to have good resistance to unload vibration. Okay, so we have some poll questions here, Priyakshi. So here we are going to show you another complete connectivity solution I have shown you also earlier, but this is um, to see where are they being used, those different kinds of connections for peripherals. Like, for example, the USB charging. Some of the vehicles have USB charge ports to charge their phone or different devices. So connector for the charging brick, and then the charging brick goes to the house socket, then charging the port of the vehicle. You can see here these are 5 battery option of this vehicle, and all of them has a distribution box, and then each of the battery has its own connector. So what is inside, once they're putting them together, this is a routed cable. It's a full waterproof. Even for those connectors at the back, they are sealed with glue so that any splashes of water are not going to contact those metal parts. So in the middle, you will see this splitter that is going to encapsulate this junction area. So the complete solution right here will feature connection to the battery, connections to the motor, connections to the other motor probably, or charging port right here. And then for the peripherals, going to those small connectors to the lights, horns, and others. This is another example uh, of a connection system where um, this needs to have a customized solution. We need to have a customized solutions in some of bikes because sometimes we just really don't have that space. So a customized solution consists of making some changes with overmold, for example, so that it can fit in those small spaces, as you can see right here. And this is an e-bike, by the way. So it consists of a display. There are splitters inside, and then remote control, display, cable, and even those range extender batteries and the charging port, all waterproof. So a lot of these micro mobility vehicles uh, uses such kind of connectors because they are needs to be rugged. Some of these vehicles used are, for example, wheelchairs or even bikes that run on water. Okay. So how to identify the connector most suitable for your requirements? Here we're going to show you an example of a catalog, a connector catalog. So the contents here shows like the model name of the connector and then the pin count and then the pin current rating. So for example, this is a 2+6 pin count. It means that the 2 pins are 100 ampere rated and the 6 pins are 5 amperes rated. And the others, as you can see, this information should be available in a catalog when you're looking for a connector. So in a catalog, you need to also know those basic requirements are met, like the current rating here. The peak current is also available. And then others like temperature and how much the wire sizes they can accommodate. Okay, and some dimensions, basic dimensions. And if nothing meets the requirement, you can always ask your manufacturer to have a customized solution. So moving on, here we are going to talk about the high performance contacts. Probably you saw, when you were handling some of these connectors before, you saw one before. If you see those, an example of this is the charging guns, for example. The big charging guns also used on those four-wheel vehicles. They are featuring a similar type of a construction, like this kind of socket. These are the high performance contacts. Uh, we have this in Chogori. It's called new sock. It's a patented contact with 3 different location patent, where um, showing here just a little bit of a comparison from a traditional leaf spring right here. The difference here is that the contact surface only has around 2 to 8 contact points. And then there are different options also out there that uses what they call a crown and belt spring. It increases the contact points, 20 square millimeter. It increases the electrical conductivity, yeah. But for this high performance contact USOC, it has this hyperbolic structure that creates a much contact area, increasing 55% the conductivity. A little bit more comparison here in terms of a 12 millimeter pin, for example, that can perform 150 ampere current. It can double and almost triple that if you're using a high performance contact. It will also give you very good temperature rise performance. So these high performance contacts are used to also to make the connector in terms of design to become smaller. It's give you also a good cleaning effect. Once you remove the connector from each other, mating and unmating is going to scrape off any residue of a carbon buildup or sodium deposits on the surface of the pins. So it's going to clean that area as well. Okay, so that ends my presentation. Sorry guys for the freezing of some pages earlier. Thank you very much for staying.
Thank you so
Priyanshi.
much. Yes.
Yep. Again, thanks, Priakshi and EV Reporter for arranging this webinar. And again, thanks, Dom, also for bringing to lights what we are doing now in terms of Chogori, our solutions, and also a lot of work that we have done in India. I'm basically reading through partly also the chat box, taking a look at the questions that come about, and try to answer some of these questions also along this presentation. Okay.
Sure.
So I'm going to turn to just give me a minute. Yep. So some background on Chogori. There's a lot of customers already in India that we work with that knows a lot about us, because we are one of the earliest to be in this market. And I've seen a question also in terms of what are the innovations that we came up with. Just to answer one of the questions that I saw earlier. The earlier years in which we were there, we see solutions going up to requirements of very high amperage, that you have power and signals are all separate solutions that takes quite a bit of space on the battery. And that's how we pack the solutions into a single form factor, having power and signal all in one platform. So these are some of the innovation that we progress in India market. Some quick background about the company. We're located in South China, in Shenzhen. This is one of our factory at the moment, where we first started in 2007. And then at 2022, we have expanded also into Dongguan, which is about another hour up north of the Shenzhen location. So collectively now, this location in Dongguan is mainly on the mass volume production. And then we have kept pretty much the Shenzhen to the R&D sites, in which we do a lot of the MPIs until we turnkey. Then we move it to this location. So both sites collectively now comprise of about 53,000 square meters of space. The company is about 700 members collectively at the moment. Okay. So there are customers that ask us, how does Chogori come about? How this name actually came about? Sounds like a Japanese company name. So for those that may be familiar, the name Chogori is actually a native name for K2 peak. So when the founders of the company named it Chogori, because it's the second highest peak, so we put ourselves always as the second, number two, and then the customer always being number one. So that was how the background of the company at this moment. Okay. So a lot of different milestones since the company founded in 2007. Then we got to be very known in the Beijing Olympics, that was in 2008 and 2010, the Shanghai World Expo, because they are very big projects. The government, all the to bid for the project, all the connectors, the suppliers submitted samples for very rigorous tests. So the criteria is the need to pass all the stringent requirements because it's a Beijing Olympics. Then the Shanghai World Expo persisted for like 6 months. So, and finally, the one that got through all the tests and put our solutions happens to be Chogori. So that was how we get to be very well known, starting in the lighting industry. Then 2013, adopted TPS, Toyota Production System. 2014, then we also became the national standard for a lot of the LED street lights. That was a massive wave all across China. Then we are currently also IATF 16949, 2016 during that time is known as TS, and now it's IATF. So we are an automotive certified facility. So a lot of the tests that we do, we need to conform to certain automotive standards. Okay. Then some of the sockets, some of the pins, sockets that we use also, we have our own invention patents on some of these areas. And progressively, we have offices now, we have R&D sites in Luoyang, in Shanghai, in Canada, in USA, as well as in Singapore, where it heads the Asia Pacific region. And 2022, so the production sites in Dongguan is up and running. And we start to migrate a lot of our high volume runners to this location. So this is just a quick view on all the locations represented at the moment from our global footprints. Then we have a lot of patents that we have applied over the years, utility model patents, appearance-wise, and also those involving sockets, like I mentioned. And we continue to invest a lot in a lot of this, especially the areas involving contact technology. The part is extremely critical. And I've seen questions also, people asking, what does it mean by temperature rise? So there's certain know-how to do overmolding, where we put the whole package together, that we will reduce the impacts associated with, high contact resistance. Because if you made the connectors many times, contact resistance goes up, it goes up, then it's going to get hotter. Get hotter, then the temperature is going to go higher and higher. And for geographies like India, in summertime, certain places are extremely hot. So we need to be very diligent in some of these considerations in our connector design. Okay. So this area here, Dom already touched quite a bit on this. And I've seen a question also that, talking about Chogori connectors, very cumbersome, it's very big, and then cables are also rigid, things like this. Chogori's core competency lies in the connector portion of it. So the part where the cables come in, where we do all the connectivity from one point to one point. Cables, we don't do cable extrusion. We don't do any of this here. The cables are literally decided by the end customers and is dependent on their system design, and it's also referencing power discharge, and then at the same time for charging. So some customers decide to use, like for example, PVC. Some customers wants to use silicon cables for more flexibility, things like that. We don't decide these things. Okay, we just need to be clear on some of this area. And concurrently, like I mentioned, we work to put these two combinations together in terms of a hybrid. So power and the signal collectively in a much smaller form factor, because we have our own contacts that we use with very small contacts, but correspondingly able to carry a very high current. So these are things that we continue to improve upon our design. Then these solutions here also is our own floating technology. You have seen some of the demonstration earlier by Dominic in his presentation. We have customers that we are already in very high volume running in B2B in India, and carrying forward with the same contact technologies. We are now also, pretty big design win in geographies like Indonesia, okay, where we are doing carrying capacities up to 80 to 100 ampere for this kind of solution. So this kind of solution, like I mentioned, the cables at the back, because the connector itself will be a slightly larger footprints, and then the cabling that needs to route. So some customers requested to use a silicon cable. So we will align it to what the customer wants and to design it accordingly. We have standard products, yes, we have, but certain OEMs, they will want us, okay, are you able to lower the heights of a certain connector? Are you able to compress it lower because of certain restrictions, things like that? These are things that we can do. We have that knowledge to be able to support some of these requirements. Okay. So again, same thing, we have patents for a lot of these designs that we come up with. Lean. Okay, so you can see the way that we wire our entire production system. We don't produce connectors with cable assembly in a batch system. We're producing everything on a single piece flow. So we adopted this sometime, bring this in about 2013 and 2014. We implemented across the entire factory. So you can see on the right picture that we are basically processing everything on a U shape, okay, in terms of how we produce our connectors. So the response is a lot quicker. If we identify an issue, there's a quality related concern, then the trigger line is very fast because everyone is just back to back facing. So this is, and we have improved a lot of the quality as well as our just in time, our deliveries and so on to a lot of our customers. So APQP, I think a lot of engineers who are under development is familiar with this system. So the fact that we are automotive certified facility, so we also follow a lot of this very, very closely. Okay, and then if we have a full range of custom solutions, just like what you see in Dominic's presentation, for those that's related to electric bicycles, everything needs to go within the bicycle frame. So the customers have very, very critical requirements, even down to 0.5 mm, things like that. So we need to work very, very closely with all these customers, mechanical, electrical engineers, until everything eventually leads to mass production. So we follow this advanced product quality plan very, very closely in our factory over here. Okay. So products applications, we have a very long history already since we started in the LED and the lighting markets. So everything you see here, we have a lot of global projects that started from the Beijing Olympic Games in 2016. We got the G20 summit and all the way to the MSG sphere at the Venetian, and there's a lot more globally that it's not able to put everything here. And then now, renewable energy markets, like new geographies coming up, asking for solar street lights. A lot of this that is pushing a lot of our resource into some of these areas. This one here, a lot already you see from Dominic's presentation, so I will not talk too much about this area. E-bikes, we have very, very small connectors, all the way down to 6 mm sizes in OD, just for signals that we apply a lot in everything that you see. And this market currently concentrated very heavily in Europe, where there is a very big drive for electric bicycles in this space. Then a lot of new things coming up that we are also working very aggressively to provide solutions. One of which is that we are currently seeing is everything related to the off-roads. Okay, the off-roads, even high-end motorbikes that is off-roads. Okay, things like this that you are seeing at the moment, lawn mowers, electrically driven. There are certain things now in the world that need to phase out diesel. So these things are coming in that many customers know about the solutions that we can provide. So we are also coming up with a lot of new things to support these areas. Then another big market coming up, everything related to horticultural lighting, grow lightings. And then a lot of this here that you see renewable energy related, GPS related, even water meters, because we are very big in this market in the US, where a lot of these water meters are basically submerged. They are basically underground in private residential areas. Okay, so we and all these connectors needs to be very rigorously tested for long time submersion in the water areas. Okay, then solar trackers, we are also pretty big in this area. Working with a lot of customers from Europe, applying in a lot of the global projects where they do major solar farms, things like that. Okay. Then we are also pretty strong now in this particular space and related to energy storage. We have a long history of products, like I mentioned, all these contacts that we do for Chinese market here for four-wheelers, that now we are extending the knowledge and the know-how to energy storage, because there are different challenges in Europe, for example, that pushes us to get into some of these requirements. Okay. Then this range of products, the M8 and M12, we also have this range of products for those related in the industry automation, as well as also for products that we apply under NEMA, which is National Marine. For those, again, same tapping on M8 and M12 and the range of this for the marine markets. Okay. So just a quick end to this. Again, thanks everyone for listening through. Last slide, just to show some of our current customers that globally that we have worked. This list is not all. The list goes on and on and on. So the customers we work with, may it be the NO, the supply chain, customers that build batteries, customers that build chargers, the vehicle assemblers at the end. We work to support everything that we possibly can. And just to also clarify that we are basically connector cable assembly specialist. We work our best to provide solutions to support the market, understanding the needs, the issues, the problems, and then many of which some other parts of it are not decided by us, it's decided by the OEMs in terms of the kind of cables to use, the power they intend to run their system, and things like this. Okay, and we work closely with everyone possible. Okay, so thank you so much for everyone's attention.